my lemsip over here. It's beautiful green color. I got my agua over here. And I got my boys doing the On the Whistle podcast. We're here for a very special live show. Yes, you are reading the banner correctly. We have 10 teams heading to the World Cup. Africa United. We are going to go there and we are going to bring as best we can with visa issues, with logistics, a vibe that is going to capture the imagination of anyone. And what I love about that New York way, Mr. Mamdani, a Ugandan via Cape Town, is he understands what African fans bring to tournaments so much so that he celebrated it so richly during the AFCON. But we will get to that. Gentlemen, only one story in town last night. 1 in the morning here in the UK. I woke up the neighbors, nearly got the Vuvuzela out. The voice was gone already. Congo, DRC, 52 years in the making. They're back at a World Cup. Sub-Saharan's first team ever to qualify in the old days as Zaire. And now the DRC, the Leopards, will make their debut. Alistair Howorth, a man who was attending the Ivory Coast Scotland game in Liverpool, is sitting on a gas station on his way back to the motherland of Scotland, Kenya. And we have Francis Nkwain, not in Yaoundé, but in London with me today. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I'm an emotional wreck. How are you?
Zayn, I'm tired. I'm exhausted, but I'm fueled with so much. I know we were saying before we came on the pod, before this week, I was feeling so negative about the World Cup. I was like, what is this, silly competition, with all this talking about all these issues. Zayn, I love the World Cup, best competition in the world. Cannot wait for America. It was so it was so good watching DRC last night. I was the same in my little hotel that I was staying at in Liverpool. I think I woke up the next door, just screamed when Tuanzebe's goal went in. Just joy. And look, Zayn, it's magical, right? Like I genuinely, I was trying to think about it this morning, and I know we're biased. I know I'm biased. I don't think there is a country on this planet that deserves to be at the World Cup and that will cherish being at the World Cup more than DRC. Just the size of the country, the role in which football plays. Look, I've never been to Kinshasa. I've never been to the francophone part of DRC, but my family used to live on the Congolese border in Uganda, and I know a lot of people in Bunya, in Goma. I was texting some of them. I've done some work with people there, and you get this sense when you speak to these people, because Congo is this huge country and in many ways is run by different factions in different places, like M23 and Goma and these places, you almost get the sense of, okay, these almost feel like different countries. And for a lot of these places, they want it to be run as different countries. And so when I've done some work there, I've spoken to people and said, what does the Leopards mean to you? Because, they play in Kinshasa. Bunya is closer to Dar es Salaam and to Mogadishu than it is to Kinshasa. It's so far away. But everyone says the exact same thing. They say the Leopards is the one thing that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you speak Lingala, Swahili, French, whatever, that it makes you Congolese, putting on that blue shirt and wearing that. And everyone says, everyone I speak to says, look, I wasn't born in 1974 when they were last at the World Cup, but we grew up with our fathers and our mothers telling us about these legends of the 1970s and being on the radio and hearing them. They're playing in Kinshasa, but in Bunya, in Goma, you can hear them on the radio. And so for me, it's just so special to have a country like Congo. I genuinely don't think any other country deserves to be at this World Cup and will cherish being at this World Cup as much as DRC. So, man, I'm buzzing. I'm through the roof. I'm so excited.
Francis, how did it feel seeing an ex-Man United man hit that winning, goal, shepherd that winning goal in?
Shepherding is the word, to be honest. Whether it was his chest, his tummy, I don't know what it was, but he got it in there. No, truly, truly happy. And I want to qualify this, and I shared this with you early on in the day, Zayn. I felt conflicted at the beginning and at the close of the game, just because it was a choice between Jamaica and DRC, because I actually wished both teams were able to go through. The Reggae Boys and what they represent, they almost carry that same kind of badge for our Caribbean African space. Um, they too are that team that deserve to be at this big jamboree. I remember when they turned up in 1998, I think it was in France.
Yeah.
The buzz that they caused, and the Reggae Boys, they brought an effervescence to it. And living here in the UK, I do know that we sometimes confuse the Congolese and the Jamaicans when it comes to style and bravado and the ability to step to the plate. So they are one people in some sense, and having to pick between them, I understand. But just like Alistair said, and kind of like what you alluded to at the very beginning, the DRC in particular, for its real share size, what it represents, but most importantly, what it's going through and what it has gone through in the last 52 years since they last qualified. They need this. They need a moment. Watching all those videos early hours of this morning of children running in the streets, people dancing, the music, like the joy that you could see it had brought to people, unadulterated. They hadn't won a trophy, but this in and of itself was a reminder that they have something to be proud about. They have a nation worth believing in, something that they can unify around. And if from this they can have deeper and more meaningful conversations on the things that really matter, like well-being, safety, the absence of war, how they use the natural blessings that they have as a nation to build their country, then that's a beautiful thing. And I think we had spoken about this even during the qualifiers when they beat Cameroon. I was philosophical about it, saying I thought they needed it more than we did. And then they beat Nigeria, and we all went, well, if they've done this to these two teams, they deserve to make it to the World Cup. And it was unfortunate that it's at the the loss of Jamaica. Um, but I'm genuinely happy for them. I have so many Congolese friends. Shout out to Eddie Caddy, who last night was dancing. And I mean, like, these guys were
What a
going
ledge.
absolutely cuckoo, losing their voices. There was a big, like, watch along organized in East London on like a penthouse bar, something like one of these top floor, really, really beautiful place. But there were hundreds of Congolese gathered there into the wee hours of the morning, dancing, flags raising, and it was almost like a little snippet of what we will get at the World Cup. And I think what they will bring to this North American World Cup will be color, it'll be sound, but it will also be great football. They have talent on the pitch. They have a coach who understands how to play to the strengths of his team. This scoreline of 1-0 is a very Congolese scoreline. They have done this many, many times over. They just nullify your game, stick to theirs, and sneak in their one goal, shut up shop, and go home. And it's usually when you're tired. So the game yesterday was what they did to Cameroon. It was what they did to Nigeria. It was like this is how they play, and they play to their strengths, and they do it really well. And I think they will join the other 9 African teams at the World Cup and really, really represent us as fantastic ambassadors. I'm really excited. Like Alistair, I'm now really looking forward to the World Cup.
If we can rewind a second, I mean, I'm sure we watched and we all absorbed that game. And Bakumbu, what is it? 4 minutes in, scores.
Ah,
Offside. Not allowed. Second half, the same thing happens.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I sit there. I guess maybe it's a South African mentality. If we don't score, I think we're going to lose immediately, right? And I'm sitting there going, look, and I want to give respect to Jamaica, but they did not pose the same threat on attack that Congo did, in my opinion.
Mm.
Regardless of your possession stats, regardless of corners, because at one point Jamaica were, streaks ahead with that, but I didn't feel like they posed a real threat there. And it was one of those where I'm going, it feels like Jamaica are just going to get this one opportunity, knock it in, and they're going to take it. And that's going to be like the end of it. So, we were obviously texting, we were messaging in our WhatsApp group, and it was like, this has penalties all over. And my mind went back to, and again, I'm a South African, so I always think about South Africa. South Africa knocking out DR Congo at the AFCON 2 editions ago. when I don't think they covered themselves in any glory during their penalty shootout. Because we know penalties are pressure. We know it's very random. We know it's not a true test of a team. I mean, I prefer it to the coin toss. I prefer it to drawing lots. Don't get me wrong. And, I've seen some pieces recently written about how this is only something that really started in the 70s. But looking at the game, it was like, how is this golden generation not going to go? What a travesty to football that we don't see the Leopards go to a tournament. Other thoughts that entered my head is like, and I share this with you guys, I would have loved 2 legs. I would have loved Jamaica to have a leg at home. I would have loved a game in Kinshasa because the home crowd could have made a big difference for Jamaica, and they probably could have got a result at home, leaving the Congolese with everything to do in Kinshasa. And we know going to play there, it's a fortress. You know what I mean? You ain't gonna go in there and expect to win. So I think a feeling from me is I wish we could have done this over 2 legs, or we could have maybe stuck it in a city with this big diaspora, London, New York, and given Jamaicans and Congolese fans an opportunity to fill up the stadium and really give it a vibe. I mean, I think the people in Guadalajara and the traveling fans did that to the best of their ability. I'm not saying it was a completely stale and anodyne atmosphere, but I would have loved 2 legs here. I would have loved, 2 legs, slugging it out. Forget the logistical issues. Let's just go at it because
I guess you're not the coach
Kinshasa,
of Newcastle then.
Sorry, say again, brother.
I guess you're not the coach of Newcastle. Wissa had to go off for 2
Go
games.
all the way back.
Seriously? Gotta go to Jamaica.
Let's do it. Let's do it for the drama, right? And again, let's be positive. I think, Congo, unfortunately, Bakumbu's goals didn't stand, and rightly so. There's no real controversy there. But I think it would have been, geez, a little bit of a travesty had they not gone in. And it doesn't matter that Twinzabi sort of bundled it in the goals from a corner. They're going. And look, I mean, let's not forget, they were in a World Cup qualifying group with Senegal. And I challenge any team anywhere in the world, whether you're in Europe or you're in Asia, and you put Senegal in your group and there's one slot to take, I'm not convinced many teams can finish ahead of them.
And Zayn, this is the point why, and this is why I think, even at the time Francis was saying that, DRC were the worthy ones to be selected to be in this playoff, is of all the teams actually in even just this intercontinental playoff, they were the ones who did the best in qualifying. Like you say, they were in Senegal's group. Zayn, they were like 20 minutes ahead of topping that group.
Yeah.
They were winning at home against Senegal in a game that they needed to just get a draw. And Senegal came back and won. And that shows the quality of Senegal, as you mentioned. But, whereas if you compare them to, Zayn, you'll remember Nigeria's disastrous campaign, drawing with Lesotho, drawing with Zimbabwe. You guys even tried to give them a leg up by docking yourselves 3 points. Look, Cameroon rallied, and Cameroon have rallied in at the AFCON, but it was a disappointing World Cup qualifiers, and they did well to sneak, into that playoff place. Jamaica is the same. Look, in many ways, I totally agree with everything Francis was saying. Like, we want to, Jamaica is one of these institutions you want to see at these tournaments, but they also kind of blew it in their qualifiers, and that's why they, Steve McLaren, who's their head coach, resigned. Whereas DRC were the ones, they kind of did everything perfectly. They came so close to topping a group in qualifiers with the best team on the continent. They then have to go and beat, at the time, AFCON finalists, Nigeria, have to beat, their neighbors, Cameroon, the ones who beat Brazil at the last World Cup. So for me, like, that's where the kind of pride is because DRC have earned it. There's no sense of like, getting through the back door, say like a Sweden or someone who came bottom of their qualifying but stuck in because of the Nations League and blah blah blah. Like, DRC deserve to be there, and they've earned it every step of the way, and they've beaten every single hurdle they have met, and they've done it brilliantly. And even we mentioned like Wissa and the traveling. Remember, like, he wasn't even there for the playoffs against Nigeria and Cameroon. He wasn't even there, and they're missing their best player. But that doesn't faze them, and that's what I think is so impressive. And like you said, Zayn, when we spoke to Guy Bukasa, the under-23s coach, ahead of the game, is he made it very clear not qualifying is not an option. Like it was never an option. And I agree with you. As the game went on, I got more and more nervous because of that idea that okay, yeah, DR Congo didn't dominate the game. Jamaica weren't out of the game, but very clearly they were the ones who DRC deserved to be the ones going through in terms of the way they played on the night. I tweeted that yeah, Cedric Bakambu was having a 1v1 fight with the offsides flag and he kept losing because all those fine details, they could have, and then but all of that doesn't matter now, and I think that's the wonderful thing, and that's what we love about football, right? Is like
Yeah.
is none of that matters, and to see the joy just of someone like Tuanzebe and again, Tuanzebe for me is someone who kind of embodies this Congolese kind of team because in many ways you could look at him and say yes, he's an England under 21 former captain. If he got the chance to play for England, he would have taken that. But he's also a guy who is so deeply, deeply rooted in Congo. His family's from Bunya. He speaks fluent Lingala. That's his family's language. He didn't learn English until he was, growing up in Rochdale or whatever. But this is what Sebastian de Sabra has also done is he's put together this great, great team, this great institution, and he's been able to say after what they did in Cote d'Ivoire, after what they've done in the qualifiers, to go to people like Tuanzebe, to go to people like Wan-Bissaka and say, "You're Congolese, we're going somewhere. Come along for the journey." And these guys have come and just augmented what was already a good team, what was already a good setup, and it's a joy to see.
It is indeed, and I think to pull on the two subjects you have both raised. I'll start with what Alice has just said. I think this dynamic about connecting with our diaspora is really really powerful. It's something that a lot of our nations need to look at to understand a little bit better what this conversation actually looks like, what it is that we bring, and what identity is. A person like Tuanzebe, 100th minute, you're helping your motherland, fatherland qualify, but you had also won the armband for England. And it doesn't always have to be an either or. We can embrace this ability to be wholesome in all of our identities. And then we have the freedom of choice where we want to lend our services, but our doors must remain open to talent wherever it finds itself. Looking at Aaron Wan Basika, this is a player who, for all intents and purposes, had wanted really to play for England. His move to Manchester United was predicated on the fact that that would increase his chances of being England's right back for many years to come. Didn't work out that way, but they were able to find another solution for him. And here he is going to the World Cup at a time where England are looking for a right back there. I say, like it's a position where Trent Alexander. I mean, you can have these conversations any which way and look at the choices, but this leads me to the conversation around a team like France, what I would term our 11th African team at the World Cup. It's again, there's so many Congolese associated with French football. Same case with the 12th African team at the World Cup in Belgium, where they have a colonial legacy. But again, in that team, you have a very good dose of DRC within that setup. So it lets us know that this country, as a country, and this continent in general, provides talent to the world. But sometimes it also deserves this feeling that you highlighted at the very beginning, that when we have 10 nations going, it is it feels a little bit more representative of the
100%.
moment. With 54 countries, before just telling us that only two could go, then after a while, it was three that could go. Then it was five that could go. It still always felt a little bit. We felt hard done by, and those who have led this campaign, who have come up with formulas that allow us to be to find a bit more equity in the World Cup, I think must be commended. So this then leads me to the point that you made about the format that it took. I think they came up with the best thing that they could come up with, factoring in the time frame of finding out when. Because think about this: these are teams now qualifying with 7 weeks to go to the World Cup, and now having to say, okay, I need to book hotels and local transportation and all of that. The logistics, it's tough. but I'm glad they found a formula to allow some other teams to make it in. And then now I really just want to say to Gattuso, whose Italy didn't make it through, and he said Africa didn't deserve to have so many places going. Well, he was given a chance to win again yesterday. And this is the third straight consecutive World Cup that Italy is not participating, having won it in 2006. So this notion of like us just having to be there by right, I think is defeated a lot when we look at some of the countries that are missing out, including mine, like Cameroon. So I'm excited about the kind of energy you have around the World Cup, where countries that have not for a long time or have not ever participated are going to get the opportunity to step to the plate and just maybe if the hosts can just allow us to actually have the kind of atmosphere that you're speaking about when you said you wish there were more Congolese and Jamaicans at the same. Yes, we want the games also to be representative of that. Not just people who are turning up because they want to watch a World Cup game, but you want
Mm.
citizens of those countries. You want people with invested in the game to actually be at the stadium to engender the kind of friendly atmosphere that could allow us to really celebrate the gift that football is to us. We call it a beautiful game for a reason. It has a certain magic to it. And I think in these moments, we see these kind of teams qualifying. Now we can only hope that the tournament itself can help us foster better understanding of each other, go a little bit deeper with understanding where we come from, and find our similarities. That's what this game really is about.
Well, one of the things that really I think captured everyone's attention during the AFCON were the Congolese fans. There was the guy who looks like me with a shirt off, and then there was the gentleman who does
Lumumba
his
Veya.
tribute to Patrice Lumumba, right? Um, the legendary post-colonial leader of that country and an icon all across the country. And if I'm correct, um, is his name Michel Nkuka Mboladinga, effectively known as Lamamba Via. Lumumba lives. I think he's somebody that I was reading about won't be able to make the tournament because there isn't enough time to sort out the visa, to sort out the bond requirements to travel to this tournament, unfortunately. But in the space that we're in, isn't it? Obviously, it's sad that he won't be there. I don't want to, pretend that it's not. But isn't it great now that these storylines can live? Like through football, more people are going to learn about Patrice Lumumba and what he did on the continent and what he stood for in Pan Africanism and how he was obviously a venerated leader and someone in our history who was huge, but now can take on a different life through this team. Would have been better if we had our super fan there in the stadium to present it. But these players who are socially conscious, no doubt fully aware of who the man is.
Well, if I may just interject really quickly, I think it's still a tremendous opportunity for us to self-educate. You know, I understand there's very little that actually happens at the stadium itself other than supporting the team. There's symbolic things that may happen that may allow people to go back and say, okay, why was this guy dressed this way or why did that
Mhm.
lady do that thing? But I think the ability to get to know has very little to do with the physical presence in the stadium. But I think this conversation, for example, that you've alluded to, the fact that we can't travel in our numbers, that in itself is a conversation we must have. Why
Hmm.
can't we? Why are we in 2026 still using words like bonds for how a person would be able to get a visa? Why does it only apply to us? $15,000 is not the kind of money most people have. And so if they applied this to the British fans or the English fans, sorry, I forget they play FIFA as England, not Britain, to the English fans, and they said, okay, everybody needs to drop a 15,000 to ensure you will return home after the stadium would be empty
Mm.
anyway.
Hundred
And
percent.
so the fact that it applies to a set of nations as if they are the burden of the world or it's a conversation that we must look at and say, okay, let's forget about it. We can still watch it on TV. We can also then say we want to march with our feet. And our feet can also be our pockets and say, okay, we're not going to pay the money that it costs that FIFA was planning to raise or whatsoever it is. for the international rights because we're going to view the games in our countries. Then we figure out that we're just gonna celebrate and we'll wait and hear on radio the same way the same way they went the first time. These guys were still national heroes without the TV rights and without people
Hmm.
being in the stadium. In
Sure.
1974, they were remembered. In Cameroon, the 1990 Cameroon national team, Roger Miller, I'm sure it wasn't because you, Zayn, watched him on TV in 1990. I'm not sure you were around. I'm just joking.
I was around
Yeah.
and I do remember him.
I'm trying to tease Alistair on the side there. But what
I
I'm
was
just trying
not
to say
there.
is, what I'm trying to allude to is
I'll
that we
hold my
have
hand up.
these opportunities to have deeper and more meaningful conversations around really important things. And you've said it about our ability to know who we are, these historical figures. I think for the Congolese to get to know a little bit more about Congo, here's a great moment for them to figure out how they use these moments, for Ghanaians to know a little bit more about Ghana, for Egyptians to know a little bit more about Egypt, and then for us as Africans to say, okay, over the next few months, how do we deep dive a little bit more into these 10 nations that are going to represent us? Other than just knowing the people who are on the pitches, where do they come from? What language do they speak? What do they eat in
Mm.
their countries? What's their history? How did this country come to have this name? This is the opportunity for all our content makers, all our social influencers. We can deep dive on ourselves and use this as a vehicle to let us just know a little bit more than the names of players who are kicking sacks of air and telling us what we do isn't that important. It's just symbolic. So let's also tap into that and learn just that little bit more about each other. And then we would have won, truly won. The World Cup then would have been a gift to us. But we would also understand why we are not allowed to attend the games, you
Yes.
know? And we must understand then what we do to make sure it doesn't happen again when the World Cup turns up in Spain, as it may do or will do in 2030. And yesterday we were picking up on people still abusing people
Mm,
of a particular hue, whilst one of their players also shares that same heritage. And we're saying these are the conversations we need to have so we can be better and we can do better. That's what football gives us the opportunity to grow, to be better.
Francis, we will get to that story in a bit, but let me bring it briefly to something on the field of play, guys. To remind people, Congo will be in Group K. They will come up against Cristiano Ronaldo's Portugal, Colombia, and Uzbekistan. I mean, the Congolese were the team that I said were my sleeper team to win the AFCON. We know that didn't happen. I'm not going to say they're my sleeper team to win the World Cup, but is it going to come down to that game in Atlanta against the Uzbeks to see if they can win and get into the knockout rounds that way, or am I doing them a little bit of a disservice by saying that Portugal and Colombia are too strong? Francis, you got the
Well,
Francis got his teeth clenched, so
No,
fight
no,
back. Or Ali.
no, Alistair.
no, well, I think I put it this way, Zayn, right? Is Uzbekistan, we saw that clip of the Italians watching the penalties between Wales and Bosnia and them celebrating the Bosnians, going through. I think the Uzbeks, the Colombians, and the Portuguese were watching the Jamaica DR Congo game last night, and they all had a sigh of sadness when Congo won, because they all don't want to play Congo, because you speak about your shout for them to go really deep in the AFCON, and it didn't pan out. But even at that AFCON, right, is DR Congo, and Francis alluded to this in their style, especially under Sebastian de Sabra, because we've had him on this podcast. He's kind of explained the method to his way he's done things, and a lot of people are kind of frustrated with him because we should be playing this exciting football. We've got these fantastic players going forward. No, what de Sabra does at tournaments is he reduces the games down to the finest and finest of margins, and he's shown for the most part that when he breaks it down to those fine margins, you can get it over the line. And that's what, again, to go back to what we were saying to Guy Bukasa, a guy who worked and works with De Sabra and is a part of the coaching staff at the Congolese Federation. And he was kind of telling us that as well. He's like, you can't be playing this attacking football. You can't. So what DRC will do is they will make life a pain for these other countries. Let me tell you, because even when they lost to Algeria, how did they lose to Algeria, Zayn? They lost in extra time to a wonder goal. You know, one of the goals of the tournament, right? That is what it takes from Portugal to beat them. That is what it will take from Colombia or Uzbekistan to get. Now, yeah, on the flip side, I could easily see DR Congo in this group losing 1-0 to Portugal, drawing 0-0 with Colombia, and beating Uzbekistan 1-0. Like, if you want exciting attacking football, don't go to DRC's games. We've as long established this. But if you want to see a team that is defensively resolute and that can compete with everyone, that's your team. And I also say, you know, this is not the Colombia team of 2014.
Sure.
You know, I would way rather have them than I would have, you know, Ecuador or maybe even Uruguay, certainly Brazil, Argentina, you know, Portugal. As we saw at the last World Cup, Ghana, who for me were the worst African team at the World Cup, pushed them to the absolute limit. Portugal beat them. I think it was 3-2 in that brilliant game. Ghana probably should have won that game. So for me, you know, it's a tough group for DRC, no doubt about it. But again, Zayn, let's not make the same mistake that people will make about us. Uzbekistan are here; they qualified for a reason. You know, their country's pumped billions into football. Let's not make the same mistakes. We always kind of criticize our European and South American brothers of underestimating us. Let's not underestimate, you know, the Asians. So I think it's a great group. I don't think it'll be an exciting group in terms of the football. I think Uzbekistan will be similar to DRC. I think they'll make games miserable. I think they won't be exciting, but I think DRC have a genuine chance. And look, this is what I will say is, you know, and in some ways I don't like this because, you know, I'm not a big fan of the World Cup's expansion. But as a third place team, you can get through. So yeah, you've got that capacity to go and beat Uzbekistan, to get a draw against Colombia, to get a draw against Portugal. But no, I think none of these teams will be happy that DRC were the ones that came through. I think they all would have much rather played Jamaica because DRC makes themselves an absolute pain to play against.
I agree with everything Alistair has said, except that he doesn't like the expanded World Cup.
Yeah, I'm in disagreement with them. The only way I don't like the expanded World Cup is if we have a more equitable split and Europe decides to give up some positions.
They shouldn't decide to. They should be.
For me, those are two separate things to me. Is I think we should still have a 32 team World Cup, and I think Africa should have, you know, 8 or 9 of those slots anyway. So it's, for me, it's more just the format. I think the kind of the format, the 32 for me is the creme de la creme of football formats in terms of these tournaments.
Ali,
if all the African teams go through,
just wait, Ali. Francis and I are old enough to remember when they said that they were watering down the World Cup by
when they made it 32.
And I wonder, and I'm not a fan, but I wonder if the politics and the nature of that proved 32 can be competitive.
Yes. And prior to that, it was 16.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes. And every time we expand, so I'm just saying
it's very true.
Right,
it's very true. And
history has shown us expansion hasn't been a bad thing for World Cups.
Absolutely, and I want to make it very clear. I'm not opposed to expansion on the basis of we're letting in worse teams. I think, you know, just look at last night. Teams like Italy, teams like Nigeria, teams like Cameroon not qualifying. For me, it's the structure. It's the fact that you have. I think when you because with tournament, you're always trying to break it down in something that's divisible by 4 because you want to get to a semifinal and to a final. And so for me, any format that doesn't do that naturally is always going to have issues. Now, I think, say in an African context,
32 is not
32 is too big.
That's divisible by 4.
Well, this is where I say that for the African context, I like the 24 teams because I think that's the perfect number of good teams. 16 is too small. Whereas the World Cup, I think we can go back and forth on this all day. I don't think the quality is diluted, but I do think the structure is. And that's why I don't like.
Let's not go back and forth today. Let's go forward. Another big talker has been Ghana and what's been going on there, getting rid of their coach on the, 3 months away from the tournament. There were reports that Walid Regragui has been approached. I'm also seeing now that Kwesi Appiah, the former coach, who, if I'm correct, is still with Sudan, is the favorite now to come in. Francis, you understand the Black Stars world. a little better than Alistair and I do because of one Chris Houghton. Is he gonna get a call to go to the US, Mexico, and Canada?
No, he got that call before when they sacked somebody else and they were trying to restructure. Then they've restructured. They've been looking to do this restructuring for the best part of the last 8 weeks, to be honest. And they had already proceeded to naming a rather expansive management team with, I think it's about 8 assistant coaches, amongst whom I think they could quite comfortably pull out a person who could lead that managerial team that they already have in place. A lot of the conversations is about them looking outside of Mr. Appears just because of he's been there twice already. Um, Understands, but he sits on the exco. And I know there's some people who argue about him having to recuse himself from his exco space to be able to, or resign at least from it, to be able to be considered for the job if he were to come back. And then they toss out all these names like Hervé Renard, for example, as well, who's in it, but he's with Saudi Arabia. Well, I know the Saudis have some issues, but he's still in job, and they are also participating in a big tournament. Then you've got the gentleman who's with Benin at present. He's done the yards. He actually came out and said he'd love the Ghana gig. He'd said this before, but I mean, he's somebody, and he's like, I think his contract runs out in something like August of this year. So he's somebody who the compensation would be tiny if they needed to get somebody in who could galvanize them. But I actually think they will look within this stuff that they've already put in place and select somebody from there to lead the charge. This team has, I think it has too many chefs in this particular kitchen,
Mm.
and they could do with actually more slimlining it. Um, but it's not the best position for them to be in this late in the day. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for them to get it right before they turn
Well,
up.
this is what I'm wondering, Francis. They are in a group, and Ali, feel free to come in too, um, with the mighty England, who lost to the mighty Japan last night, Croatia, always a force at recent World Cups, and Panama, who recently beat South Africa, the powerhouse in the South, 2-1 in Cape Town. And Mbakazi Cracker sideline. Go watch it. It's beautiful. But did Otto Addo deserve to be sacked this late before the tournament? Sure, the team, I think, haven't won their last 4 games. They got thrashed 5-1 by Austria. They lost 2-1 to Germany in their most recent friendlies. But I mean, is this not Harry Kiri on the eve of a tournament like this?
This happens.
Yeah, for me,
With
Zayn, it's sorry. For me, it's more. It's for I look. I don't necessarily have a strong opinion on Otto Addo, but for me, it's just another clear example of how the GFA in many ways just is so rudderless in terms of its ideas. Like Francis is saying, they've been trying to do these restructures. They've done a previous restructure. Yeah, you know, who did Chris Hughton come in after? Who was coaching? It was Otto Addo, right? Like who came in as an interim, kind of wasn't expected to stay around, but then pulled off the miracle by beating Nigeria in the World Cup qualifier. So it's just none. And then for me, what the issue is Francis is talking about how if you got say Gernot Rohrer in or someone like that whose contract is on a short thread, is they have to think like that because they've also thrown so much money at Otto Addo. So it's like if you didn't believe in this guy, why did you? I think they're paying him $800,000 in compensation because he was given the biggest contract in Black Stars history. And so for me, this is where the issue is. I'm not necessarily against getting rid of a manager at this late stage, but it's the fact that we haven't seen the kind of coherent planning for a long time. For me, I don't think Otto Addo should have been the coach coming into this World Cup, but I think he should have been sacked after they didn't qualify for the AFCON, right? Like for me, this is where we have this issue, and that's for me is where there's huge amount of pressure coming in. I mean, and we saw and with Ghana, right, you also have this country right now that's kind of baying for blood. Like I remember being at that press conference when Chris Hughton was just knocked out of the AFCON at the last AFCON they were in Cote d'Ivoire, and you felt so bad for him and the players because you had these journalists who were like baying for blood and so angry. And look, they ultimately weren't angry with the players and the coach. They were angry at this system that has for so long not allowed for the country to thrive, not allowed for good communication with the press and with the media, and has allowed this kind of really kind of negative energy to like fester. For me, that's the issue. But for me, you can't schedule friendlies against teams like Austria, Germany, and then be surprised when you lose and sack your coach. I think for me that's what's kind of unforgivable. It's once you've got to this stage, for me, you can't be sacking your coach because you've planned these friendlies for your coach to prepare. And ultimately with these friendlies, the results don't really matter. It's the performance. And I would say, particularly in the second game against Germany, it was a very good performance. Yes, Austria was a bit of a mess. And look, I would say actually in the first part of the game, they looked pretty good. But even when you look at what Ghana's problems are so much deeper rooted. I mean, even if you just look at the standard of player that they have to call upon, when you compare this squad to the great teams of 2014, 2010, 2006, it's night and day, right? Like, and so for me, Ghana's problems go a lot deeper. I think now, look, they could still show up. And I said this at the last World Cup, right? I thought they were at their lowest of the low, and they showed up to the World Cup and played really, really well. And were tremendously unlucky not to get out of their group. They were in such a tough group as well, with Portugal, South Korea, and Uruguay, and they did really, really well in that. So it's for me, if there is one nation that no matter how badly things are going, they can show up to the World Cup and still do well, except for Cameroon, it would be Ghana, right? Because it's in their DNA. They are such a good World Cup team. But for me, it's just so disappointing the way this kind of nation has been managed over the last 5-6 years by the people in charge. And look, I hope things change. I hope, and I'm sure Francis is going to come back at me and disagree in a moment.
Not,
But for me, that's where it's the frustration is we shouldn't be here in this position.
no, I agree with you. You're right. I just wanted to ask. My question was more. You don't think they have a good pool of talent globally?
I No, so what I would say, right, is I would say there's a couple things. Is I think they still have a good pool of talent. I don't think this pool of talent is anywhere near what it was in 2000, 2010, 2006. But I think the second thing is, and again, this is for me, this is clearly a structural issue, right? Is they have some very good players who are coming from Ghana, and they have very very good players coming from the diaspora, right? Like Antoine Semenyo is one of the best players in the Premier League. Inaki Williams was brilliant in Spain. But for me, what I think is the issue is, and what points to a structural issue is, they've really struggled to incorporate these guys, right? Like Antoine Semenyo has been, maybe in the top 4 or 5 players in the Premier League over the last 18 months. He has been dreadful for Ghana, dreadful. And for me, and is the exact same thing with Inaki Williams, one of the most consistent strikers in Spain. Fantastic for Athletic Bilbao. When he came into the Ghana squad, he really struggled. And so for me, that's when it's okay. If it's not just a one-off, one of these players is struggling when they've being integrated into the Ghana team. It happens time and time again with these unbelievable talents. Semenyo
But
being the
now
best
but
example.
you're
What is he?
making 2
2025?
points. My question was, you're saying they don't
What?
have the talent that they had in the 2010s and 2016s. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to expand the window. But that's the same. Ivory Coast team could say the same thing. Cameroon definitely can say, okay, the players were bigger and better and whatever. But I think they have more internationally exposed talent now than they actually did. Those guys were making their names, and they made their names with Ghana, for example, and then got the international exposure, and then they became household names. These Semenyos, for example, okay, him, it's like been 2 years of him becoming this player that Man City say he will buy. 3 seasons, 4 seasons ago, he was playing, not non-league football, but like he wasn't playing elite football anywhere, and he's emerged. But players like Kudos have been around for quite some time, but again, in the last 2 3 years, they've emerged into this team. Inaki Williams, I agree, and then you can say, okay, maybe the coach isn't using them right. But my question was about you saying the talent isn't there. And I think they have the talent. Maybe the challenge has been the system that they get played in. the coaching, and maybe then that's the decision that the GFA now were trying to say, okay, maybe this dude doesn't know how to use them. I don't know, but I just thought when you made the point about the talent, I just wanted to be
Yeah.
clear because I think
No,
generally you could say
I,
that
I,
about
I,
a whole host of countries.
I yeah, I think it's both. I think they have struggled to incorporate the talent they do have, and I think they have struggled to develop talent. And I think you look at the performance of their youth teams, right? Is we're used to Ghana and Nigeria being the ones winning youth World Cups, youth AFCONs, and they've struggled at every age group. So I think we
Are
can
you
say
blaming the right to
that
dream,
yes, they've.
therefore? They're
No,
extracting the talent too
look.
early
I
and
think
taking
Martin,
them.
you've done great. Well, I think we need to maybe have these conversations, Francis. But
We do.
it's
That's
two.
what
I
I'm
think it's
alluding
both,
to.
right? And look, and with other nations, I also think it's not a nation. I think it is a nation specific issue, right? Because I would say, because say for instance, Cote d'Ivoire, I think is completely different. Like I think the pool of talent Cote d'Ivoire have now is insane, and I think yes, at the moment they don't have players that are quite at the level of your Didier's, your Yayas, these guys. But in terms of the depth of talent, I would actually argue Cote d'Ivoire's depth is bigger than it has ever been. I mean, remember, I was we were talking about it before we came on the podcast, but I was at their game yesterday against Scotland, where they were picking them apart. Bazumana Traore, Simon Adingra, and Nicolas Pepe. And this, I was saying to these Scottish journalists, guys, this isn't even their second string
Jan
front three. This is
Diomande
their
wasn't
third
even
string front
there.
three. It wasn't even there. So for me, actually, and that's why I think these conversations need to be specific to countries, right? Because I would say Ghana has struggled with the structure and then with the development as well. Where say Cote d'Ivoire, you can maybe say, okay, yes, they still need to work on the structure and the structures in the federation behind the team, and they can professionalize and do better. But in terms of the development of players, oh my goodness, that team is unreal in terms of the talent
But
they
do
have
you
on
think it's
offer.
the
I would
federation
go as
that
far
does
as to
that
say
work? Isn't it like
I
just
think
where the
I
eyeballs
think
go?
and it,
Like, I'll give you the example of
I think
Cameroon. I'll give you the example of Cameroon. In our country, we have a regular debate about the lack of talent. Regular debate. And then people say, there's been no Samuel Eto'o. That generation of Mboma, Eto'o, Jeremy, Lauren at Arsenal, all of that. And a lot of the times I say, I think a lot of the players that are available now are actually technically better. But we have an issue with when they're extracted from our space and then when they also play competitive games. So if it's 16 and 17 back in the day you were playing, like Lamine at Barca, your team, um, like as he gets to start playing at 17, top end football, competitive football, the very, very best. So those Samuel Eto'os also at 19, they were kicking ball with the big boys. So now we've got players like Kofan, for example, for Cameroon, and they go, okay, the reason they might emerge, or Avom, it's because they're playing, or Baliba, it's because they're playing at 18 and 19 and 20. Teams are not letting them, but playing them at those ages. So now, by the time they're 22 and 23, they'll be extremely competitive. So I looked at a Cameroon team against China the other day, and these were names that you ask the average person in Cameroon, do you know this dude? They're like, no. And they're not playing at big clubs. We had a young boy, Kiben, who plays for Watford. He looked amazing, but he's playing China. So somebody would go like, "Oh, you can't really judge him," but I'm like, "But these Chinese guys, I've watched Chinese football too, and they're a lot more physical than I thought they would be. Like when I say physical, I mean strong. They were doing 50-50s, and Cameroon boy bounces down, and you think, oh, this is interesting. The world game is changing so much. That's why, like the game with Panama yesterday, some people could have sat in their homes and just gone, South Africa should be able, they're at home, they'll beat these guys. You're
mm,
like, that's not football anymore. So when we do the
We're also
comparisons and
three
we say,
positions or 33 positions above us in the FIFA rankings. So
yes, exactly. And even how the rankings are done is a whole other thing. Like Australia beat Cameroon in the game before. And I was having a conversation with a friend and he was like, we should not be losing to Australia. I'm like, why not? I'm like, they're going to the sixth consecutive World Cup, right? And they are 24 places ahead of us in the FIFA rankings. And yet, as a nation, we still go, why are we losing to
Yeah.
Australia? Why do you think you should beat Australia? And it's this realistic conversation I think we need to have a lot more of, to look at where we actually are and why we are doing what we're doing. And for Ghana to full circle it is, I think it's a mixed bag of reasons, but laying the buck at the door of the coach is one. Saying, oh, the talent may not be there is a hard one, because I don't think that's the job of a federation anyway. So you need to almost be asking the home clubs, how much are you doing to retain home talent in your space and play them competitively when the kid is 15, 16? Is he playing alongside the 23-year-olds and the 24-year-olds in league football in Ghana? How are you accommodating the player who was born in London or grew up in Paris or in Spain because their parents had emigrated 20 years ago, and he's now 19, and part of him wants to play for Ghana? Okay, what formats, what tournaments do we have that recruits them in early enough for us to bet them in? Is it the sole responsibility of the federation, or should CAF be creating spaces that these younger players get to come and play, and it's competitive enough, it's organized enough, it has enough eyeballs, and the scouts will still, and nobody's still whispering in your ear, it's better for you to choose to play for England than to play for South Africa. These conversations are never as simple, and that's why I just pushed back a little bit, because when we say players, I think we're doing a disservice to talent that just by geography, not geography, just by biology alone and physics, they are better than the players that came before them. Pele, I love Pele, but there are things that some average players in League One football are doing now that Pele probably couldn't have then, but he was great at his
Watch your
time.
mouth, Francis.
No, no, no. I'm a big lover of before.
This
But
isn't talk sport. I'm not
no, I'm not
entertaining
doing
it.
talk sport, man.
I'm not entertaining it.
No, no.
You don't have to.
I see what Francis is saying.
Watch your
Yeah,
mouth,
but I guess
I'll send
Francis.
you to go watch
No,
the
no. I
Australian
look.
League in Scotland or something.
I think is this, and look, Francis. I think you've raised many great points in terms of like who is the one who's responsible for developing talent, who's the ones who's responsible for then incubating it and for making it good. And I think, Francis, there's many different ways to skin a cat, and we can see in our own continent the ways in which you do it. We can look at Zayn's lot down south, where they do it through the Idiski leagues, and they have great structures, and that's really done by the clubs. Or we can look at Senegal, where it's really done by these academies, but the federation does a lot to help the academies get the best, from what they can do. The way I would say, there's many ways to skin a cat. I guess my only concern is right now in Ghana, I'm not sure they're skinning a cat anyway. Would be my what I would say is,
No,
maybe
but that's
I'm
the
not
point.
saying that there's a right way to do
I'm
it,
saying
but I'm
they're
not sure
skinning.
there's a lot of wrong ways to do it.
No, I am saying they're skinning, and their skinning also is reflective of the times. It's not, maybe before when they won their 4 stars, there were maybe 6 teams competing. When we go back and look at it, so the 4 stars that they won, winning AFCONs and all of that, was a different time. Just like England only won their 1 star in '66 when there were 8 teams at the World Cup or whatever it was, and they were hosting it as well. But that's by the by. What I'm just trying to say is things like Right to Dream and many others plugged into a play because talent had been proven to come from that space. The Michael Lessons of this world, and like all of these amazing talents, and then they came in, and but now these boys are leaving at 15 and 16, but they are better footballers at those ages than the talents that attracted the people into the space. But are they being made available to the national team? I don't know. Because where they've been taken to sometimes is not on the chart of respectability, according to the old managers who are sitting as bosses. So when you come and say a kid's playing a Nordstrom,
100%.
are they going, oh, no, they want the kid who's at Chelsea, for example. The kid who's playing at Marseille because they have a great history as a nation with Marseille. And all of a sudden now the young talents are playing in smaller leagues in Latvia, in Denmark, and but they're also of the age that 18, 19, where that's where they're getting their first team football. And they will come of age by the time they're 22, 23, and will turn up just like a Kudos in the Premier League with a Tottenham. And when they all start coming to the fore, all of a sudden we'll go, oh, the shoots that were being taken at the time when they were having their dark days, there were shoots being that were sprouting. They were taking root. And we're not seeing that part. And we're having conversations if something is wrong systemically. No. For the scouting that I do in African football, if you go through the top 20 leagues of world football, there's almost a disproportionate representation of Ghanaian talent, young talent. They're there and they're being shaped and they will be made available to their national team when the age and the timing is right. And these players are beginning to emerge in their numbers. And maybe, yes, the challenge is how are they bringing them in? How are they funneling them? But the pressure of the games that they're being funneled into is tough. So now you're turning up and there's a World Cup qualifier because we don't have enough friendlies and they have to deliver.
If I can really quickly, knowing we have 5 minutes left, I'm going to turn the dial. And this was a very good discussion, guys. And for those listening out there, if you've got an opinion, if you agree with Ali, agree with Francis, in the middle like me, social media is a good place to get in touch. OTW_podcast, X, TikTok, Instagram. Or if you've come this far, we're almost an hour in, ask us a question, leave a comment. You know where we are on YouTube, on Facebook, or whatever podcast player you go and consume on. Search for the On the Whistle podcast. Gentlemen, I'm going to read a quote and I'm going to ask one more question as we look to wrap up the show. And this was an interview that Vinicius Jr. did almost 2 years ago. I had the privilege of going with my colleague at the time, Darren Lewis, to his home in Madrid. And we did a wide ranging interview with him for CNN. And we spoke to him about racism in football, but particularly in Spain. And Francis, like you said earlier, there's a World Cup that's meant to be hosted in 2030 in Spain, Portugal, and Saudi Arabia. I want to read you his quote from that interview. Until 2030, we have a lot of room to evolve. I hope that Spain can evolve and understand how serious it is to insult someone because of the color of their skin. If by 2030 things don't improve, I think we have to move the location. Because if a player doesn't feel comfortable and safe playing in a country where they can suffer racism, it is a bit difficult. Now, I bring this up given the fact that we mentioned Spain earlier. They played against Egypt in Barcelona. It was a draw, creditable draw for Egypt. But the big controversy was that during the game, it was overshadowed by racist and anti-Muslim chanting from sections of the crowd. Egypt's national anthem was jeered, and fans chanted offensive slogans targeting Muslims. Stadium announcements repeatedly told fans to stop. Even after the game, coach of Spain, Luis de la Fuente, called the behavior intolerable. I mean, I got to ask myself, and again, I don't say this that I'm surprised that racism takes place. It does. But I am finding it really strange that this is happening in Barcelona when Egypt are playing Spain in a pre-World Cup friendly. And I'm perplexed by this and, of course, appalled by this. And unfortunately, is another black mark on Spanish football because we see these issues domestically. Francis, what was your reaction to what you saw?
Well, it's just again disappointment. But there are just some things that just keep resurfacing, that keep happening. And I don't think the consequences to date have been heavy enough, reflective. Like in what Vinicius was saying, he said like this element of people not really understanding just how grave a crime it is to the spirit, to the soul, to the being of the person who's affected by it. Um, I don't feel there's been an empathy. There's been sympathy. There's been maybe some level of comprehension that it's for the marketing of the game, it is inappropriate to tolerate it. But I don't think there's been an understanding, a true understanding of how dehumanizing it can be and just how strong these young men and women, because it happens in the women's game as well, have to be to deal with the moments. and it's taken for granted. And I think consequence must be something that the authorities must look at. But the empathy will remain to be will continue to be absent for as long as we don't have representation at the decision making level. And that's the truth. The punishment is meted out to people by people who don't fully get it, I don't think. And that's why you can say, oh, pay 20,000 pounds as a fine and we move on. Who's the 20,000 pounds going to? I mean, like,
Mm,
what's it going to serve? Like, nobody bothers to explain that part. Say, oh, they were fined. Well, we hit the club where it hurts. They will play without home fans for a game. Okay, they didn't make 2 million, and what? Like, and that did what for the soul of the person
mm,
who like this inability to understand that part. Spain will be hosting in 2030. Um, Portugal, where our big brother, Mr. Mourinho, defended and said in Portugal we don't have things like this
mm,
because we have Eusebio. When another player complained about being badly spoken. This same player, actually, Vinicius, also in the Champions League game, also said, "But hey, a player has just done something to me." And rather than us figure out how to understand, it was like, "Well, you must have done something. You did something to incite." How are you inciting people by the skin color of your skin? It's just there's very little you can do about that other than bleach it off. And then we move even to Morocco, the other potential host. There are some people who have the insinuations about the conversations around the terminology of Black Africa and this distinguishing between who's and the Senegalese were alluding to that even during their own space, during their own issues. But these three countries will be hosting something really important. People's faith, abusing people because they're non-Christian it's not acceptable. Abusing another set of people because they're not a shade of skin color that you like is also not acceptable. But we need our authorities to be stronger in the punishment that we mete out to the people who have some level of control. And that's why the point I was making about before, where I was saying things like the World Cup, things like these games, it's more than what happens at the stadium. Our ability to educate each other is at the heart of what the sport brings. It's
mm,
an opportunity for you to get to know what you have in common with others. And even if it's just our humanity, we need to figure out how we highlight this a lot more. We focus so much on the games, we focus so much on financial, but no, it's other things that are more important. Those human things, the fans who are sharing the space, where your jerseys are made. Do you know they did this cotton pact for the World Cup that FIFA announced? I think it's called the cotton. Well, something about the cotton and the jerseys for this World Cup this year, and try to explain and where the cotton is coming from. But these
like
things
a
don't
fair
get
trade.
enough. Yes. But trying to humanize the process, explaining why costs are what they are and how we could contribute to bettering the sort of the others. The others are humans in different places in different circumstances. We can do better as a people, as a sport, as supporters, as fans, to educate ourselves a little bit more, um, just to know a little bit more about the opposition, why we are the way we are, why we believe in the things we believe. But because at the heart of supporting and supporters is this tribal notion of identity, it will forever be the us against them. And so when a young black man is playing for Spain, they no longer see his black in a moment, as long as they're winning. So, whilst they may have been berating the faith and the colors of others during the World Cup, during the national anthem, or I don't think in the Egypt game it had a lot to do with color in that instance. I think the context of the world at present, with the issues in Iran and how people don't understand this dichotomy between Persians and Arabs and Islam and Christianity, um, things are conflated into things that they are not, and it's very easy to get a crowd going, cheering or jeering on very simplistic terms. The politics of the moment is very divisive. And so people are subscribing to common denominators. And hate is one of these things. And that's why I think it's incumbent on our administrators and the people leading us to highlight what we have in common more, to champion the stories, the narratives around our similarities, the things we have in common, highlight those as opposed to focusing on our differences. Because it's easy. You either cheer or you jeer. And those two things happen with based on the information you're fed. And when we're in a crowd, we feel safe. So if we've been fed negative info, when we're in the crowd, we kind of amplify that and we feel safe to do so. And it's a very human thing, you know. I don't think it's the exclusive preserve of any particular nation. I don't think it's the Spanish people that are bad or it's Portuguese people that are bad. It's the messaging of the moment and the responsibility that we have to have. It has to go beyond platitudes. We have to educate ourselves really deeply, and we can use our stadia to do so. We can have content that we play in the build up to games at the stadium that can also help to set a tone. And I don't think we do enough of these types of things to help us help ourselves. And that's what I would say. It's long, but it's a complicated subject.
Mm, Francis, always so thought out. I mean, we've got a big community out there consuming. We thank you, those who've joined the discussion, joined the chat. Um, we thank you too, Kazambila, who said hello. But not to diminish your point, Francis, it is wider to what's going on in the world, and we do hope that football also acknowledges their role in this and how they can put in place sufficient sanctions, punishments, and deterrence so this doesn't have to be a consistent
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah. Can I just add one thing? We spoke about it slightly before. Young Suzuki, goalkeeper for Japan.
Yes,
You know, what he represents when he stands out there, it's just such a standout thing. Like you think Japan, they have a phenomenal tennis player who has gone out of her way to also try to share with the world the challenges of being
yep.
biracial and
Naomi
being
Osaka.
defined as black, right? And Suzuki, who plays for Parma in Serie A, born in the USA, Japanese mother, Ghanaian father. Ghana could have called him up for their national team. Back to Alistair's point about detecting talent early. But you see him standing in in the goalpost between the stakes for Japan, and immediately you go, oh. But what it should inspire in us is a desire to want to find out more. I know when I saw him, the reason I know he plays for Palmer and his mother is because then the bit of information is I can go type his name and learn a little bit about him and go like, oh wow, what a beautiful story. I'd love to know more about this gentleman. I'd like to know what his experience is. Not even just as a black man playing for Japan, but American. Think about the history of these two
Sure.
nations. There's a complexity to it. So I can go for the simplistic thing and say, oh, there's a black guy who plays for Japan. I need to pick a side. I'm either against it or no. There's a complex human story there. And that human story can make us all richer. So, yesterday, while England were losing to Japan, I was looking and thinking, wow, look at this Ghanaian descendant playing for mighty Japan. This country that, when I close my eyes and I think Japan, I think kimonos and yakuza and like I don't have an image of this gentleman, and his name is Suzuki. On top of that, like as Japanese as it gets, But I don't know enough about him. But I'm encouraged to see that as a human story because all of a sudden I'm seeing myself in Japan and I'm kind of like just leaning and going like, oh wow, what a beautiful story. I don't even know anything I don't know enough about it, but I know something about it to inspire a sense of goodness, a sense of warmth towards them. But I know in others, that's why I said share and jeer, it might inspire something else. And that's why we have the duty, therefore, to have those who are curating the game for us, those who are custodians of its essence, to remind us in those moments about the beautiful things. We could have had a beautiful story about how he got to be goalkeeper before the game to help inform even some of the supporters who are coming there for England, just to say, like, hey, maybe you guys as a nation are so advanced that this is not something that even catches your attention anymore in 2026 because you've had so many of people like him play for you. But in this country, this is what it means. This is what it represents. This is our story, and this is where we're going. We need the journalism that also does that and packages it in a way that people can understand better. So that's all I add.
Francis, very meaningful, very well thought out. Remember why we had this pod? Celebrating the 10 African teams heading to the World Cup. Congo, we doff our hat. Thank you for all that you did. Jamaica, we wish you well. Your time will come. We know it's been a long time since 1998, but it's longer since 1974. 74.
Yeah, 74.
Yeah. So
52 years.
For those who've come this far, please like, subscribe. We do live shows. We do tape shows. We do big interviews. And now, until the build-up to the World Cup, we will give you all your African football news that you need to know. Whether you're an African football fan or whether you're trying to find out about the teams that your team will be facing. Francis, we wish you well. Alistair, we thank you. We know you're back on the road, traveling to the mighty hills of the Serengeti. No, you're not. The mighty hills of Scotland. But we will get around. We'll be back. Look out for our content later this week. And Francis, we wish you well. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you, brother.